the most overrated legacies of all time. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate on this video, a lot of people disagreeing with it. Now, just because I say that their legacy is overrated doesn't mean that they're not in the top 5, top 10, whatever. I just think that people talk about them higher than they actually are on the GOAT list. Starting off with number 1, in my opinion, Demetrious Johnson. Now, this sucks because I love Demetrious Johnson. He was the first fighter I ever watching the UFC, but I just feel like, obviously we know his resume in terms of quality isn't the best. It's more quantity, which I think quality is more important. But not only that, when he finally faced elite competition like Henry Cejudo, he lost. And I rewatched that fight recently. I don't think that was a robbery, and I actually think that Cejudo won that fight. He did beat him when he was out of his prime, but I just feel like if he fought in today's era, he would face a ton more difficulty. I feel like obviously he wouldn't have the 11 title defenses, which does matter. Obviously not many elite wins. I do think he's in the top 10. I don't know where exactly. I think somewhere around like maybe 7, 6, somewhere around there. But people talk about him. When people say Jon Jones is the GOAT and the main rebuttal is no, Demetrious Johnson is actually the GOAT, I just don't see that. He does have a few pretty solid wins, but in terms of elite wins, he doesn't really have that many. Obviously, he lost to Dominick Cruz. I get it. He wasn't in his prime, but still losing to Cejudo when you're in your absolute prime, that's not a great look, and it shows that while he was above his competition, he wasn't that far above the elite level, in my opinion. Moving on to the next one, Henry Cejudo, just talking about him. In my opinion, many of his wins have massive asterisks against them, and he mainly just has that Demetrious Johnson win, which, you know, he is 1-1. I get the first one, he wasn't in his prime. But outside of that win, if we look at his other ones, TJ Dillashaw, the weight cut. I mean, that was a massive disadvantage. That fight should have never happened. You have the Dominick Cruz fight, which, you know, you could say early stoppage, but not even that. Cruz was coming off of a 4-year layoff, and it was the easiest champ fight I've ever seen in my life. On top of that, he had 3 consecutive losses to Aldo, Merab, Song Yadong, where he did look kind of in his prime. He didn't really look washed, in my opinion. He looked like the same Henry Cejudo, and I do think that he was elite. I don't think that he was in the top 10 at all, and I arguably think he shouldn't even be in the top 15. I just feel like a lot of his fights, he had a massive advantage, and he wasn't that much better than everyone else to put him in the top 10, in my opinion. Moving on, next up is Charles Oliveira. Now, I recently made a video about talking about how I think that he could beat Ilia Topuria, and I still think that he could do that, but I feel like that his skills are underrated. You know, people underrated his skills, obviously, against Ilia, against Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. But his actual legacy and resume is overrated. And, you know, he's my favorite fighter, so it sucks to say that. But if you look at his wins, right, unfortunately, a lot of them have not aged that well. You have the Michael Chandler wins, haven't really aged that well, and especially before he got the title, Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, have definitely not aged well. I know Jared Gordon, that probably was one of his better wins that aged well. Obviously, Dustin Poirier aged well, but a lot of his wins just have not looked the best. Beneil Dariush, that's another one. He has 10 losses, and he's not the lightweight GOAT. I love him, but I just don't think he is. It's definitely Islam Makhachev or Khabib. He's not top 15, but if he can beat Ilia, which he does have a decent shot at doing, a better shot than people give him credit for, he can be top 15. That would be such a good win, and even though he doesn't have a ton of good wins, if he could rack up Ilia Topuria, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje all in one, and then still have the okay wins like Dariush, Michael Chandler. I know Dariush was on a winning streak, but still, it'll definitely help his legacy. But right now, before that fight, I feel like it is a little bit overrated, especially if he loses. It's going to be a really bad look. But yeah, I think that his legacy is a little bit overrated. Jose Aldo. Now, I feel like this is one I'm going to get hate for. I feel like most people are starting to kind of agree. He struggled against the elite of the elite. He has a lot of good wins on his resume, but in terms of great wins and elite wins, he does have some, but he lost to a lot of those guys. You know, you can't put him higher than Max when he lost to him twice in his prime. He lost to, obviously, Volkanovski, McGregor. I get he only fought those guys one time, but still, he lost to Peter Yan, got finished by Yan. On top of that, the recent losses in his career. He obviously is not the featherweight GOAT. I've been saying this for years. I never really thought he was the featherweight GOAT, especially when Volk. I feel like when Volk beat Max for the third time, that cemented it. You know what I mean? There's no way anyone past 2021, 2022 could have called him the featherweight GOAT, but people still did. And a lot of people put him at top 5. It was Jon Jones, Demetrious Johnson, GSP, Silva, and then Jose Aldo. I never thought he really belonged in that 5 spot or even 6 spot. I think he could be top 10, but I don't think that he's top 7 in my opinion. I don't think that he should be near the top 5. He also has many glaring holes in his game. His takedown defense was great, but he did get held against the cage and he didn't know how to get off of it very well. His cardio was also never that good. I like Aldo, but he's just not a top 6 or top 7 fighter of all time. And I think that's pretty obvious. Moving on to the next guy, Jon Jones. He does have a good resume, but the second half of his career is just nothing but disappointment. He's fighting guys that aren't that great, aren't elite, and he's arguably losing to them. And then on top of that, his heavyweight run has been super disappointing. Only beating Ciryl Gane, not the real champ Stipe, avoiding all the tough fights. He only fights when he has a massive advantage. And the DC second fight and the Gus second fight, I don't really count those. His longevity is pretty impressive, but so many asterisks, a very tainted legacy. And I don't think that he's the undisputed GOAT, like many people say. I think you could say that he's the GOAT, but to say that he's the undisputed GOAT, I don't agree with. I feel like that's where people overrate him. He was very good, but a lot of it had to do with his reach, steroids, cheating, eye poke, stuff like that. Very dirty fighter. Moving on to the next guy, Dominick Cruz. Now, this one sucks. It's not really his fault too much, but he lost out on his prime with injuries. He wasn't very active. And outside of the TJ Dillashaw beating him in his prime, very impressive, there's not much else to his legacy and his resume. He lost to Cody Garbrandt. That's a really bad title loss. And then the Demetrious Johnson win was before he was in his prime. The Faber wins are good, but I don't think that they're like elite. And I don't think that he's the bantamweight GOAT, and I never thought he was like the undisputed, he's way better than Aldo or all these other guys. And I thought, in my opinion, if Merab were to lose to Umar, if he loses the third round, 48-47 Umar, I still think he would be higher than Dominick Cruz. And I thought if O'Malley beat Merab and then maybe one other person, he would be the new bantamweight GOAT. I never was never too high on Cruz. I don't think he's top 10, and I don't really think I think he's like around maybe 15, 16. I don't think he's that high. It's not really his fault again. I also don't think that he would stack up very well in the current day, in the modern MMA world. But yeah, moving on to the next guy, Israel Adesanya. He just lost so many times in his prime where you can't consider him one of the best. I know people nowadays don't even consider him the best striker of all time, top 5. But even in his prime, I don't think that he was ever really top 10, top 7. I never really thought he was that great. Many close fights, not on top of the losses, Jan Blachowicz, Alex Pereira. He had many close fights where, like Whitaker, Romero, where he showed he wasn't above them. They were like neck and neck. And his wins, like Jared Cannonier, Marvin Vettori, those wins haven't really aged that well. And when you really look at his resume, Kevin Gastelum, that's another one where that win hasn't really aged that well. And I think recently he still looked like he was in his prime against, Dricus and Mavov. He looked great in those fights. He just kind of got caught. And those are bad losses to take in your prime. Not super bad. Dricus, Mavov, very good. But it's just adding to, on top of that, the Strickland loss. When you really look at this, I just feel like he has no business being in the top 20, in my opinion. He was good, but he never was great. He never was elite. Paulo Costa, that win, that hasn't aged that well. Anderson Silva, obviously great win, but when he was washed, I don't think Adesanya is that high, in my opinion. Good fighter again, but not great, not elite, in my opinion. But yeah, those are the legacies that I feel like are overrated, that people overrate, and really aren't as high as other people say. Again, that doesn't mean that these aren't good fighters, that these, that they didn't accomplish a lot. but I think a lot of these guys aren't really in the top 5 in my opinion. Let me know what you disagree with specifically, which fighter I missed, which fighter you agree with. Let me know what you think. But yeah, that is it for me. Let me know what you think, and yeah.